Good afternoon, traders. Welcome back to another week of what I like to call Mind Over Markets. This is your bi-weekly dose of psychology, performance, an all-round approach to help you improve your consistency as part of what you do in the markets. If you're new here, introduce yourself. Make sure you come and say hello in the comments. It's always nice to see and hear from you guys. If you are a regular attendee, you'll kind of know what these sessions are about. You kind of know what we focus on. Every week or every other week, I pick a specific topic to focus on, something that has been a part of my journey, something that I've helped traders with over the last 5 years that I've been working with them based on their psychology, their performance. And it's all packaged up to deliver a 45, 50, 60-minute session for you guys to help you to improve your consistency in the markets and help you to ultimately make a little bit more money. That is the obvious goal that we are always working towards as part of what we do. Now, today's session is a very, very good one. As always, I'm in a good mood today. I'm hoping to deliver a very impactful session for you guys. And I think for the context of what we're doing here at Darwinex, I believe today's session is very much on point with what we should be focusing on in terms of our mindset and our mentality about how we approach this game. By this game, I'm talking about the game of trading, investing, making money from the markets in the long run. And that's what we're here to do. So today's topic is all about the idea of learning to play the long game, right? Learning to adapt your mind to thinking and playing in the long game. Because I have found, at least in my journey, this game is not about speed. It's about how long you can really survive. Because truly speaking, and I've shared this many times on these sessions before, I had a pretty horrific start to my trading and investing journey. It started back in 2012, and I lost money for my first 6 years, largely because I wasn't working on any of the right things. I didn't have the right mindset. I didn't have the right approach to developing an edge in the markets. And it was a complete disaster. For 6 years, every year, nonstop, I was losing money. And had I had the mindset at the very beginning of I want to get rich overnight, I probably would have thrown in the towel. I probably wouldn't be sitting here today. I probably wouldn't have gone through all of the experiences and had all the benefits that trading gives. And when I say benefits, I'm not talking about the money or the freedom or the popular things that are spoken about online. I'm talking from a place of largely the person that I've become. I believe I've become a better, well-rounded individual in every area of life as a result of going down the pursuit of trying to be a consistently profitable trader and still working to improve every single day. So I think having this mindset of learning to play the long game, again, in the context of what we're doing here with Darwinex, I think is a really important foundation to be able to lay if you really want to be serious about finding success in this game. What's up, BT Capital TV? I can see you in the comments. Thank you so much for tuning in. Great to have you with us. I have found over my years and kind of my experience in this game, I find that a lot of traders, they don't necessarily fail in the markets because they can't trade. They fail because they are forced to quit too soon, right? And I like the idea of actually throwing in the idea of they're forced to quit too soon. And I think most people are forced out of the markets, usually for one of two reasons. Number one is maybe they have unrealistic expectations of how quickly they are going to be successful. Or number two, and this is usually the bigger one for a lot of people, they have poor risk management. Often you'll find that poor expectations lead to poor risk management. But one way or the other, if you fail on any one of those counts, it's generally leading you to a place where you are forced to quit trading. Not because of lack of ambition, not because you didn't work hard enough, not even because some of the time you didn't have a good strategy. It's largely because you didn't do the right things to preserve capital long enough to allow you to play the long game. The thing that I love telling traders, and I like reminding them, and honestly, it's a reminder to myself every time I say it, but we have to remind ourselves that P&L is a lagging indicator in this game. It's the thing that often comes right at the very end. We understand that idea, or most of you that have had some experience in the market understands this idea of what a lagging indicator is. And you have to think of P&L in that exact way. It's not the thing that comes at the start. It's not the leading indicator. It's the thing that comes at the very, very end. And it comes as a result of following your plan, being consistent with your edge, managing risk in the right way. And of course, in terms of the mentality, actually focusing on playing the long game. I heard a quote, I think roughly around a couple of years ago, and I think it applies so well to everything that we do in terms of trading and investing, because I've seen many people go through the emotional roller coasters, the highs and lows, and unfortunately quit long before they find their potential of what they're able to actually achieve. And the quote says, "Quick success builds ego, slow success builds character." And it's something that I've always kept in the forefront of my mind ever since hearing it, because I think my journey has been a lot like this. And funnily enough, and I don't think it's a coincidence, the people that stand the test of time in this game, they all seem to follow a similar path. True story, I had a friend text me literally this morning, telling me he heard a story about somebody in the crypto space that turned 79 pence into something like 800,000 pounds. And he said, all we need is one play like this. And my response was, a few years ago, maybe I would have been hoping and praying for the same thing. Again, if I'm being completely honest. But my response was, after seeing so many people go through the cycles in the market that they do, I have found that most people that find quick success in this game, they attribute it to skill when actually it was probably more so luck. And instead of withdrawing that money and just going about and enjoying life, they believe they can do it again. And so they put a little bit more money back in and it doesn't work. And then they put a little bit more back in and it doesn't work. And then they start getting frustrated and they start doubling up their positions. And then ultimately they end up in this place where they've either given away a large amount of their profits or they've blown everything and they're right back to where they started. And it all goes back to this idea that quick success only tends to build ego. Slow success it's not glamorous. It's not pretty. It's not the dream that most people sell you online, but it's the thing that most people need to truly build character, the skill set, the mindset to actually be able to survive in this game. I have found, and the thing that I love most about partnering up with Darwinex is the traders that really succeed here and the ones that are really rewarded are the ones that prioritize playing that long game. They're the ones that are thinking in years and not in days. They're not counting down to the next payout. They're focusing on the idea of how do I build a long-term sustainable track record? And that's the mindset that really gets you across the finish line of what we have to be focusing on. I have found, again, as part of my journey, as part of the journey I've helped a lot of traders go through over the last few years, that there are really three pillars to playing the long game or thinking in terms of the long game. It's patience, it's process, and it's perspective, right? Patience in accepting that nothing sustainable is going to come overnight. Process in terms of trusting repetition. Sometimes, doing things that are boring over chasing short-term thrills and excitement in the market. And the last one is perspective, right? I think this is the one that most people lack nowadays because our perspectives are ruined by what social media throws our way. Ultimately, I tend to find that zooming out in the tough moments, which are inevitably going to occur for every single one of us, that's the thing that allows us to understand that there is randomness in the short term and probability and edge in the long run, but you just have to be able to see it that way. Now, I want to give you guys a reflective question. If you're in the chat and you'd love to feedback, please feel free to throw a comment out. For those of you maybe watching this back on a recording, something I want you to just take 5-10 seconds, pause the video and actually think about, because I remember the first time I thought about this, it actually opened up an interesting insight into understanding how I approach this game. When you first got into this game, how long do you think it would take you to realistically find success, right? How long did you think it would realistically take to find success in this game and, become the trader that you envisioned and imagined all those, months, days, weeks, years ago? I don't know how long you've been in this game, right? Because honestly speaking, I had a very flawed expectation coming into this game. Luckily, it was something that I managed to get rid of very, very early. But it set me up definitely in the wrong mindset to begin with. And that was when I first started in 2012, I traded a demo account for about 6 months. And in those 6 months, I achieved a 25% return on my demo account. And I did what most people would do going through that sort of experience, being new to the markets. I created a spreadsheet where I built a little compound calculator, and I worked out if I could, earn 25% every 6 months, as well as adding a little bit of money to my pot along the way, how quickly would I become a millionaire? And obviously I fooled myself into the idea of believing that it was going to happen in a relatively short period of time, believing that 25% return was going to be consistent. And I'm not saying it's not. I'm just saying if you're expecting it every few months without fail, that's where you're really setting yourself up for failure. And so I came into this game fully expecting that I was going to have a lot quicker success than I was. And I think luckily, with the perspective of hindsight, I didn't feel this way at the time, but luckily with the perspective of hindsight, it took me a lot longer than needed to find any breakthroughs or success in this game. And when I say success, I don't speak from the place of I'm some uber successful multi-millionaire branching on billion. Like, I'm not that guy, right? I do okay for myself, but I'm very much still a work in progress. And I think that will always be true. The thing about trading is there is always a level up. There's always more capital to manage. There's always a step up from where you can go. And I think keeping that kind of student mindset has been something that's been very, very beneficial for me. And I think works better for the majority of people. The moment you get arrogant, the moment your ego comes out to play, I think that's when you're most likely to be humbled by the market. And that's the thing that I'm working to avoid most, if I'm honest, right? So take a brief moment to kick off today's session and just ask yourself that question. How long did you think it would take to become the trader that you envisioned? Living the life, making the money, having the freedom, like how long did you believe that it would take? Because whether that's something that you still believe or not, it's good to understand what the thought process is. Because whether you know it consciously or subconsciously, that sits in your mind somewhere. And for you to be able to actually start playing the long game, you need to be able to reframe that. You need to be aware that that belief, that experience existed as part of your journey, and practically work to change that thinking to develop the longer term mindset. Thinking in, years and decades rather than days and weeks when it comes to making money, achieving your goals, and becoming the person that you ultimately want to become. Okay, so that's what I want to focus on today. I want to take you through a little bit of unpacking this idea of playing the long game. I want to help you to understand why psychologically it's so difficult for most people. And I think there's never been an easier time to get into trading, but there's also never been a harder time to find success. And I'll expand on that. I believe playing the long game and developing that mindset is very, very difficult for most people. And then I want to give you guys something practical from today as well. I want to give you mindset shifts. I want to give you practical strategies to actually commit to playing the long game. And then kind of end today's session with some just kind of long-term ideas to help you instill that over the long haul, and then some kind of reflectionary points to wind today's session down on. Okay, so let's start at the very beginning. Let's actually unpack why playing the long game is so difficult, because I think there are a lot of people that mistake this in thinking that they don't have enough psychological willpower to think the way that they're supposed to think. And in some instances, that may be true, right? You may just be making very simple mistakes that can quickly be corrected. But for a lot of people, these are things which are inherently built in as part of the game and today's day and age, which makes this difficult. And I think the first one, which is an important one to be aware of, is in today's day and age, we are very much chasing instant gratification, right? We're wired for dopamine. If you don't believe me, go into a coffee shop and look at the people standing in a queue. How many of them are standing there completely mindful, completely present, and just locked into waiting for the next person to go? You will find that in a moment of boredom, in a moment of lull, in a moment where there's nothing going on, the first thing people do is they pull out their phone and they start scrolling, they start doing something, they start multitasking in some way, shape, or form, but they're looking for some type of dopamine fix, because standing in a queue and waiting for, to order your coffee is fairly boring, at least I would say, right? But most of us we're wired for this. We're used to getting dopamine hits. We're used to these, kind of instant feedback loops. And this is how social media has wired us to be ultimately. The platforms that we mostly use, the Instagrams, the Twitters, the TikToks, they are all wired in a way that they prioritize the people that, they are built in a way that they are aimed to capture your attention. They want you to be able to, stay on the platform for as long as possible. And so they provide you this kind of endless amount of content that's going to continue giving you dopamine time and time again. And this is amplified by so many of the other systems that we take for granted in this day and age. The next day deliveries, the Amazon Primes, the 60-second results, the overnight, successes that you're kind of sold in every way, shape, or form. Trading gives you absolutely none of that, right? There's no guarantees of how long or, how short your journey is going to take. And the reality that most people find is you can spend a long time doing absolutely everything right, but still lose, right? You could do all of the right things, but if the market conditions are simply not in your favor, it's just not going to pan out for you that way, right? I mean, this is something I'm experiencing at the moment. I'm currently down 4R in the month of November. It just has not been my month. And every week I come to the end of my trading week and I look at my results and I ask myself one question. If I was to redo this week over again, would I do anything differently? Would I not take any trades? Would I have taken some trades that I maybe didn't participate in? And the answer at the end of every week at this point in time has always just been no. I would do everything exactly the same way. And that's what makes trading so difficult. You feel like you're doing all the right things, but you don't feel like you're getting the results that you're hoping for. And this is just part of the game. It's amplified and it's made worse because the moment you start having all these kind of lingering feelings, you go onto social media and all you see is, people getting payouts and people passing certain milestones and, people getting into, Darwinex silver and gold and whatever it is they're aiming for. There's always someone that seems to be a step ahead. Whether social media is a true reflection of reality is, a story for another day. But the ultimate thing that most people land on is you start comparing somebody else's highlight reel, whether it be true or not, to your journey. And you end up feeling behind. You end up feeling like I need to be doing something more. I need to rush the process. I need to speed up this journey because they're doing something that I'm not. And I need to figure out how to do more than they're doing because I'm better than them. I'm more capable. I'm smarter. I'm quicker, whatever it is, right? It fills your mind with all the wrong mentality in finding success in this game, right? Now, something that we touched on there, and I think actually makes for one of the second reasons why playing the long game is so difficult, is trading is one space where you get very inconsistent results based on what you do, right? Good trades can lose, bad trades can win. When I say a good trade, I'm talking one where you followed your plan. You can follow your plan and you can still lose money. You could gamble and you could still make money. That's the reality of what this game is like. And that makes, short-term judgment unreliable. If you're only measuring your progress by P&L, then it's going to set you up on an emotional roller coaster because you can never really control when and how much money you're going to be making in this game. I think if you don't give yourself clear feedback, your brain is always going to assume that you're not improving during moments where you're doing everything right, but not actually making any money. We're not wired to believe the world works in this way, right? The traditional, maybe the modern day schooling system, it doesn't teach you this. It teaches you that if you work really hard and you study right and you revise and you get good grades, you're going to get into a good university or college and you'll have a good job off the back of that. And that's what the traditional, kind of thinking has led you to believe. It's very linear. If I work hard, I will be rewarded. If I'm a good person, good things will happen to me. If I exercise and I eat right, I will lose weight. Everything in the world is very linear, but trading, it doesn't quite fit that narrative. And when we create that kind of conflict in our mind, this is what we call in psychology, we call this cognitive dissonance. It's where we hold two opposing beliefs around a similar thing, and they just work to create friction in our mind. And again, it's one of the main reasons why trading is so difficult for a lot of people. We never stop to comprehend this idea that you could do everything right and lose money and everything wrong and make it. Now, ultimately, over a large enough sample size, this only tends to end one way, right? And that is emotional fatigue, right? You have the grind of, the losing or the breakdown periods, and ultimately every single time they drain your motivation. They suck the life out of you. You start doubting yourself. You start questioning whether it's worth it or whether putting all this effort in actually makes any difference. And you don't actually understand that, like, there are going to be loads of moments that fit along this narrative. If you don't understand that the hardship is always inevitably going to exist, it's going to be so easy to throw in the towel. I think so many people are focused on this idea of, they think that there is this moment to trading where everything clicks, the markets just become this ATM, and you're going to be able to print money whenever you like. And there is, certainty in terms of outcomes over a specific period of time. It doesn't work that way. You have to understand that even when you get to the top of your game, there are still going to be moments of frustration. Every one of the best traders that I have been fortunate enough to meet over the last few years, they all still experience like frustration, anger. They go through periods of drawdown. They take losses. They go on losing streaks. And they feel every single one of the same emotions that we do. The difference is they have learned how to do something differently in response to those emotions. They understand that just because I think and feel something, it doesn't necessarily mean that I have to act on those things. Whereas most people, we can't separate those, right? The moment we think something, the moment we feel something, it becomes a part of our identity. It becomes part of how we respond and how we react on a day-to-day basis. We don't understand how to separate that emotional fatigue, and that's something that will always inevitably work against us, right? The last part, and I would say arguably this is the one that most people are unaware of, but possibly the most dangerous one. It's your identity and how you frame that with everything that you're doing in the markets. If your self-worth, if who you believe you are and how well you perform in this game is completely dependent on outcomes, you are setting yourself up for failure, because you're always going to feel behind then when you lose. In order to play the long game, you have to be able to detach your identity from the outcomes of the market. You have to be able to accept and fully tell yourself that I am not my short-term results. The only thing that you can rely on and the only thing that you can value in the long run is your process. And again, this is why I like the idea of how Darwinex was built. It's built on this idea of sustainable performance, not short-term glory, right? You could go in and, on your Signal account behind the scenes, you could be making 25, 30, 50% in a week, a month, 3 months. It doesn't matter. But if you're not trading in a way that the platform and everything in the back end deems sustainable, then actually that's not going to be reflected on your Darwinex account, right? And that's what you have to keep in mind. It's not there to limit you. It's there so that it actually builds you some sustainability in the long run. It fully understands this idea that the same approach that will make you a large amount of money in a relatively short space of time is often the same approach that causes most people to blow up. And that's really what we're trying to avoid. We're trying to build traders, individuals, investors that are in this game for the long run. And what we don't want to see is, we're not looking for a perfect track record here. We're looking for people that can ride through the market conditions that are presented over time. And they are always going to be uncertain. And that means you're going to have losses. You're going to have periods of drawdown. That doesn't hinder your progress. Actually, seeing you go through a period of drawdown and being able to recoup and come back out the other side and hit a new equity high, that's the most telling thing about how successful you're going to be in this game. And that's what this platform prioritizes, right? This is what makes Darwinex different to a lot of the other, kind of modern day prop firms that we have available for us now. Most people are wired to this idea of, just working towards getting a big payout, even if it means blowing their account and resetting and coming back and doing it all over again. They're not thinking about that long game. And that's something that we want to change with the Darwinex platform, right? So we've got 4 big reasons here as to why most people struggle to play that long game. It's the instant gratification culture. It's the inconsistent results between what you put in versus what you get out. It's the emotional fatigue that wears down most of us. And the last one is what you attach your identity to in this game. These are all very, very common pitfalls that most of us make, but it is possible to break free of them, right? There are successful traders in this world. There are people that absolutely clean up in this game. Not all the time, but over a large enough sample size. And I believe that success leaves clues, right? I'm a big fan of the likes of people like Tony Robbins, and that's something that he's famous for saying. And so I like to study the people that do well from a psychological perspective, from a process-orientated perspective, to understand what I can take from their approach to the markets and how I can apply it, how I can teach the same to my clients to help us just become that 1% better each day. I think if that's something that you can instill mentally, it's going to be far easier to find the success that you're looking for. Not immediately, but over time, ingraining that idea of playing the long game, I definitely think it's possible for the majority of people, right? I think if you fully commit to the idea of saying, I'm going to dedicate a decade to this game, and every single day I'm going to do a little bit of work to just become 1% better, I believe everybody has a good shot of really finding success in this game. If that's something that you need to ingrain, if you find yourself too focused on the short-term outcomes, I think the next couple of sessions are really going to speak to you, because what I want to start with is giving you guys initially some mindset shifts to make, because I believe the best change starts from the inside out. And once you're kind of cemented these mindset shifts, then you can apply the practical process-orientated things on top that help, build on top of that good foundation to keep you consistent with thinking and playing the long game as part of what we do here, right? So first and foremost, what can you do in terms of mindset to help you to start focusing on playing the long game? The first thing I think that makes the most sense is you have to redefine what progress looks like in this game. Because I think the mistake that most people make is they only feel like they're making progress when their equity curve is going up and to the right. I think what most people need to understand is you also have like a discipline curve. And that discipline curve can be measuring a variety of different things. It could be looking at, have you taken fewer emotional trades? Because if you have, that's positive progress. That's a step in the right direction. Have you made smaller mistakes or lesser mistakes than you made the previous week, the previous month, or the previous quarter? Because if you have, that's positive progress. Have you found that you're being more consistent with your routines, whether that's on the charts or off the charts? Because if you have, then that's positive progress. None of those immediately will translate to immediate P&L. You could do all of the right things. You can make less emotional decisions. You can make less mistakes. You could be more consistent this week than you were last week, but it doesn't guarantee that you're going to make money. But mentally, the moment you flip that switch and you redefine and you understand that I am still making progress, I am still moving in the right direction, it actually helps you to adopt a more consistent mindset. You're not going to beat yourself up after every week. I have had, like I said, I'm down 4R this month, and I've come into my trading space this week and I feel great. Honestly speaking, I feel like a very, very good level of mental clarity and energy and focus on what I'm doing. Not because of my results, but because every week I'm looking back and I'm understanding that I'm doing all the right things. There's nothing more that I could have done to give myself the best odds of making money. And whilst it doesn't change the outcomes by any means, it makes it less of a blow. It makes me focus on the idea of that I am focusing on the things that I can control. The moment you tunnel vision in on things that you can control versus the things that you can't, it's where you really find growth in the long run. Okay? So start with that. Start by redefining what progress means to you, because I think it's a very, very important point that most people miss at the start of their journey. And if you get it right to begin with, it can be something that really helps you in the long run. Okay? Point number 2, another way to mentally change your thought process towards the markets. It makes sense to detach from outcomes and attach yourself to process, right? Detach yourself from outcomes and attach yourself to process. Why? Simply speaking, you can't control your results. At the end of today, this week, this month, possibly even this quarter, maybe even this year, you're not guaranteed to make any money. It's completely possible for a perfectly good and profitable strategy to not make any money for periods of time. Periods of drawdown are a very, very normal thing. Your job is not to avoid them. Your job is to manage them. And it's a completely different mindset to have. You can only do that if you're prioritizing your process. Your process is something that you have complete control over, right? So the thing that most people need is really just to be able to zoom out. You need to start assessing your results monthly. My preference is quarterly, or if you really have the mindset for it, annually. Don't worry about what's your P&L today, tomorrow, this week, this month. Just ask yourself one thing. By December 31st, am I going to be profitable? Am I likely to yield a profit by that point? Because if so, all the short-term losses, the losing streaks, the periods of drawdown, they're irrelevant. They're all part and parcel of what you have to go through in order to achieve that the overall end piece, the end prize that you're looking for, right? So you have to think about this game as like kind of like a 1,000-piece puzzle. Every day you're kind of just laying one piece. You're not going to get the whole puzzle complete. Your job is just to focus on the process of laying that piece as perfectly as it can be laid and accepting whatever outcome is relevant. Sometimes you're not going to put that piece in the right place. It might look like it fits. It doesn't. You realize later down the line, it was a mistake. You take it back. You try something else. This is the game that we play, right? The third and final thing, I think from a mental perspective, which is really, really beneficial to keep in mind, is you can't rely on motivation. The number of traders that I have spoken to over the last few years that focus on the idea of, I need to be motivated. I can't backtest. I can't collect data. I can't go through my journals because it's boring. I don't want to do it. I don't have any motivation. Motivation fades. Motivation, in my eyes, is a scam. Wherever you've learned that you have to be motivated to do the things that you are supposed to do, it sets you up for such an inconsistent path for succeeding in the long run. And I'm not saying this as a perfect individual that doesn't rely or use motivation, but I don't believe motivation should be the driving factor behind what you do, right? Whether it's morning routines, whether it's journaling habits, whether it's things that you do outside of trading that help you with your process of becoming a trader. It might be a risk checklist or a breathwork routine or meditation. This is what's going to help you by being consistent with these practices, even when you don't feel like it. There are going to be many things that you don't feel like doing. Your job is to show up and do them anyway, because that's what allows you to have the clarity of mind. That's what allows you to be a better risk manager. That's what allows you to eventually find the profit that you're looking for, right? I passed a milestone. This is a complete personal reflection, but I think it probably serves as a good lesson. I have been meditating for a number of years, and I recently passed a milestone, which was I passed 1,000 consecutive days of showing up to meditate every single day, right? 1,000 consecutive days of showing up to meditate every single day. And I didn't do that because I was motivated. I wasn't able to do it because every day I felt like sitting down and, focusing on my breath. It wasn't like that. There have been many days, probably weeks, probably an accumulation of months over the last number of years that I've been doing this, where I felt like I didn't want to do it. The same is true of every part of my trading, every part of my health and fitness, every part of, working on relationships or family or friendships, whatever it is. There are many things that I don't like doing. The reason I do them is not because I'm motivated, but it's because I have systems. I have a process. I have things that I must follow to get me through to the end of my day. And I find that's what builds consistency over times. So mentally, what you have to stop doing is you have to stop focusing on motivation. Replace that thinking with the idea of systems. You need something sustainable over time that's going to get you across the finish line. And I think that's going to be the most beneficial thing for you in the long run. Okay. Now, on to some practical things that we could focus on. We've talked about some mental, some mindset shifts that we can make. What are some practical things that you can actually start doing on a day-to-day basis that will help you to develop that long-term perspective that you need in order to find success? Okay. The first thing that I always encourage is to make sure that you have a good quality journal. And when I'm talking about journal, I'm not just talking about just the trades that you're taking. I'm not saying, you need to document when you got in and out of this trade in the markets. They're very beneficial to keep track of, but this is not what I'm talking about here. I believe when it comes to consistency, when it comes to playing that long game, when it comes to valuing the process over outcomes, I believe that there's a lot of value in journaling your behavior. I believe that every single one of us should be tracking our state of mind, the state of our, emotions before, during, and after every single trade that we take, right? You want to write about why you took an action, not just about what you did. Because if you are serious about being consistent, the times where you are inconsistent, you need to understand why that has happened. I hold this philosophy that action is largely influenced by emotion, and emotions generally come from thoughts. So if you want to take different actions, if you want to do different things on a day-to-day basis, if you have bad habits or things that are holding you back as part of your trading progress, then in order to understand why you're repeating those bad behaviors over time, you have to understand why you're doing them, right? What is actually happening behind the scenes that's driving the thoughts, driving the emotions, and ultimately influencing your actions over time. Okay. So the more and more data that you can collect as part of your journey, the more and more you will start to understand yourself, and the more it actually becomes a part of your blueprint. Your journal over time with enough data will become your blueprint for finding success and consistency in the long run. But mostly, overall, what it does over time, it reveals what truly moves your results. It's not fancy analysis. It's not, this magical strategy that you claim to have. It's your behavior. Because the reality is you could have the best strategy in the world. And I'll put that in quotations when I say that, because I don't believe one exists. But you could have the best strategy in the world. But if you are the person that is responsible for clicking the button, if you're responsible for getting in and out of the market, then there is a big part of this game that is dependent on the quality of your mental state to be able to do the right things, right? And I have seen this impact people, whether you are a discretionary trader, whether you're a mechanical trader, whether you're someone that has coded your strategy to just run automatically in the background. I have seen people break their system because they don't like the short-term results that they're getting, and they're not focusing on the long-term sample size of what is likely to occur. They start tweaking and changing things for themselves because they believe that their discretionary approach can be far more beneficial. In reality, not generally always the case. There is not a real hard rule of thumb behind that. Okay. So start journaling your behavior and not just the trades that you're taking. Secondly, right, outside of your journals, I think it makes a lot of sense to have process-focused goals rather than outcome-focused ones. We see this all the time in the health and fitness space. I'm going to lose 10 kg by the end of this month. I want to be able to do, 50 kg bench press in the next 3 months. We give ourselves these outcome-based goals, but ultimately, we don't have direct control over how quickly we progress. I'm a far bigger fan of the idea of taking that philosophy into the markets. Instead of giving yourself this goal of saying, I need to make 10% in the next 30 days, start by telling yourself, I want to execute the next 20 trades before I reflect in complete alignment with my plan. That's something that you can actually control, right? You can't control when you're going to make 10%. Like we've already established, you could do everything right and you could lose money. You could do everything wrong and you could possibly make money. But you do have complete control over how well you actually execute your process over time, right? Replace the idea of, I need to hit, silver or gold status, or I need, X amount of investment as part of my Darwinex, journey. You can't control that stuff, right? Focus on what you can control. Focus on the idea of, I need to journal every single trading session this month. Something that you can completely control and will give you a much better return on your time and your energy over the long run, right? Goals for me should reinforce patience. They should not apply extra pressure. The moment you switch to outcome-based goals, you feel like you're almost forced to perform. And I find people that are chasing this imaginary target, it forces them to think, I need to act in a certain way in order to be able to make it possible. If your goal was to make 10% by the end of the week, and from Monday to Thursday, you haven't had a single trade that has aligned with your plan, guess what's going to happen on Friday? You're probably going to be more inclined to create an opportunity which may not actually exist. And that's something that you really have to be mindful of. Okay. So switch your goals to process-focused ones. Get rid of the idea of the outcome-based ones. And I think that would be really, really beneficial for you in the long run. Okay. Quinton Maldonado, I hope I'm pronouncing that correctly, says, love Darwinex 18 months in. This is awesome, right? This is exactly what we want to be seeing. We don't want to be seeing people that are resetting or restarting their Darwinex journey every few months because they haven't enjoyed their performance. So the fact that you're 18 months in is testament to the idea that I'm sure these are probably all things that you can resonate with from a mentality perspective in terms of playing that long game. Meran says, hello. Hello, Meran. Thank you so much for being with us today. Right, where were we? We talked about setting processed focused goals and how they often outweigh the outcome focused ones. On top of this, I'm a big fan of having checkpoints and checklists as part of how you approach the market, right? I often refer to these in the short term as a pre-trade checklist. It's your kind of criteria for getting in and out of the markets written down as a checklist so that you know every time you execute, you have done the right things in alignment with your plan. The outcome is uncontrollable, but how you get into the market and making sure that all of your criteria are ticked off is most definitely within your control, okay? Now, you can expand on this and build this one step further. You can give yourself certain checkpoints in which you should be doing certain things, and that encourages this kind of long-term perspective over time. So building on this idea of having this daily checklist to ensure you're doing the right things, at the end of every week, you can then go on and score yourself based on execution, not based on outcomes. At the end of every month, you can sit down and you can have a reflection and a review period over your emotional patterns and not just your profits. Every quarter is when you can sit down and say, right, I'm going to go over the sample size of data and I'm either going to refine or adjust my system based on the new insights, the new data that I have collected. And if that's a good reflection over how this works over time, then maybe this is something that I am interested in tweaking as part of my approach, right? You're not doing this from a place of frustration. You're doing this based on data. You're doing this based on something that's actually going to move the needle and something that will actually support the idea that it will improve your edge over time, because you can prove it. When you have data behind your approach, it's very easy to prove that, at least from a probabilistic perspective, you're moving the odds greater in your favor rather than against you, okay? Two more points that I think are beneficial to have as part of your process in the markets. I believe everybody should have a strong why, right? Everybody should have a strong why, because the markets, at least in my experience, maybe you guys will resonate with this, maybe this will be alien to you and maybe your time is to come. But I find that trading will test you like no other game that you will play, right? It will take you through moments of doubt. It'll take you through moments of thinking about whether you should call it a day and whether you should quit. But ultimately, having a why, having a good reason as to why you are playing this game and why you're, ultimately playing one of the hardest games in the world, you have to understand exactly what you're doing it for. Is it for the freedom? Is it for the money? Is it for mastery of the game? Is it for legacy? Define whatever you want, but be very, very specific and clear about why you're doing it. Like a good, clear why for me is understanding that I'm not just doing this for me. I'm doing this for the next generation, or I'm doing this to help out my parents or my grandparents or my siblings or whatever it is. That's far more meaningful than what most people will sell you online. It's not just about the numbers at the end of the day, a week, or the ones in your bank account. It is about having a real driving force past money, past freedom. If you don't really have a why, you're going to be so likely to throw in the towel during those difficult moments. Because I promise you, at times, every single one of you are going to have those moments where progress feels like it doesn't exist. It feels invisible. Your why is going to be the thing that keeps you moving forward. The long game, for me, I have found at least, is sustained by meaning. It's not based on motivation. It is all about meaning in this game. And so you guys have to decide, what is your why? Make it deep, make it powerful, make it impactful for you. You want to be able to think about your why. And in that moment where it feels difficult to do the things that you are supposed to do, it should drive you to take one step further. That's how powerful your why should be. Okay. The last one, and the one that I think is very, very underrated in this day and age, is have the right people around you. If everybody that you surround yourself with, or if the only information that you allow into your mind reflects those of a gambler, those that are, constantly chasing short-term results, and, they're blowing accounts and resetting and, doing all those sorts of things, you need to surround yourself with the people that are going to value sustainability, right? You want to be able to talk to people and actually be able to share the boring stuff, the flat weeks, the disciplined exits, even when they didn't go in your favor, the small wins. If you don't have people around you to be able to share those sorts of things with, it's going to be very easy to feel like the grass is greener on the other side. Communities like we're building here at Darwinex, they're built to reward sustainability, and you want to be able to surround yourself with like-minded people. So whether that's people on social media, whether that's finding an accountability partner from maybe inside the Darwinex Discord, for example, you want to do things in a way that are prioritizing having the right energy and thought process around you. For someone like myself, I always would encourage, and again, I'm going to be biased in this instance, but I would encourage, find yourself a performance coach, someone like myself, someone that's going to give you the raw reality of what this game is like. If you have come to the end of a week and you've made money doing all the wrong things, you need to be aware of that, because it's not supportive of you playing this game well in the long run. And vice versa, if you've had a terrible week, but you've done everything right, I'm going to be the first person that says you should pat yourself on the back, right? You don't need a coach by any means to find success, but it can most definitely speed up your journey of getting to where you want to be in the long run. Okay. So just build the right people around you, whether it's that coach, whether it's an accountability partner, whether it's finding the right mentor online, whether it's finding and connecting with someone in the Discord. There's various ways to do it. And honestly, in this day and age, we're spoiled for choice, right? Before the internet was about, you only really had the people in your surrounding area that you could liaise with on a day-to-day basis. The internet has changed everything. Now you can send one message, one tweet, one post online, and you can connect with hundreds, thousands, millions of people in a way that you have never done before. And that's what's going to help you to find the long-term success of what you're looking for. Okay. So those are my 5 practical strategies to help you to be committed to the long run. Journal your behavior, focus on process-orientated goals, have those checklists and checkpoints in place that you can do weekly, monthly, quarterly. Make sure that you have a deep and meaningful why as part of your journey, and be sure to just surround yourself with the right people over the long run, right? Obina, again, apologies, I hope I'm pronouncing that correctly, says, yes, I was tested last week. Again, you're not alone, my friend. I ended last week 2R down. I'm 4R down on the month. This has been a testing month for me. And it's especially more difficult when in those moments where you find it's You're doing all of the right things. You're just not getting the results that you want. Those are the moments that it becomes so easy to doubt what you're doing. Momo Trader says, Darwinex has helped me to build confidence and helped me to realize slow and steady gets you there faster. Their risk engine is honestly what kept me alive over the last 21 months. That's awesome to hear. Genuinely such amazing feedback. And I know not just for myself, but the rest of the team at Darwinex will be so thrilled to hear something like that, because this is exactly what we're trying to build here in the long run, right? There's a beautiful quote. I wish I invented it and I didn't, but I steal it and I use it so often. It's a quote by, at least I heard it from Alex Hormozy. And he has this quote that says, the long way is the shortcut because the shortcut never really gets you there. And it's just so poetically and beautifully put. And it's so reflective of so many areas of life, trading being one of them, right? The people that are selling you this kind of overnight success, funding overnight, millionaire, rags to riches, all that kind of idea, it doesn't really give you what you want. The long way is the shortcut because the shortcut never really gets you there. So beautifully put, but so reflective of everything that we do here. Quinton says, I had a 6-month flat and drawdown period, but I knew the winds change on a longer period over a longer period of time with patience. 100%. But you know what? Honestly, Quinton, credit to you, because going through a 6-month period of being flat it's not easy. And it's something that, anyone that's watching this should be aspiring to get to at some point in time. Like, to be able to deal with that and still come out the other side is very, very commendable. And that for me is a true sign that you trust your data, right? The fact that you can end that with, I knew the winds would change. That to me says, I have an abundance of data that tells me over a long enough period of time, my strategy will perform in the end. And that's where we go back to this idea of like forgetting your results daily, weekly, monthly, and just saying to yourself, like, where am I going to be at December 31st? If I can be at profitability by December 31st, it was all worth it over time. So honestly, kudos to you, Quinton. I think that's a fantastic achievement, and not one that a lot of people will be able to say that they've been able to accomplish in this day and age, right? Okay, last sort of closing and reflection points for today. I'll open things up for a little bit of Q&A towards the end as well. So if you guys, for those of you that are watching live, if you do have a question that you would like to throw my way, feel free to throw it in the chat. I will hang on the line for a couple of minutes if there are any questions towards the end. And if you have any issues, if you have highs, lows that you're experiencing, if you want to share a little bit about your journey, I'm happy to go through and unpack those things. And if I can help you to get over a hurdle or a challenge, more than happy to do so, right? Closing reflection points for today. Big key takeaway things that I want you guys to understand off the back of today's session. The market rewards consistency, not intensity, right? The market rewards consistency, not intensity. Every day that you stay disciplined, you're separating yourself from the 95% of people that are chasing that overnight success and ultimately not going to end up where they want, right? You have to be able to play that long game, focus on the process-orientated things, and understand that there is randomness in the short term, but probability and edge in the long run, right? That's what you really have to focus on over time. I think it's important to remind yourself, and I like to wind down a session like this by re-emphasizing a point like this, that playing the long game, it's not glamorous. Like, think about what Quinton shared in the chat, right? 6 months of a flat period. It's not exciting. It's nothing to telling people in the moment that, my last 3 or 4 months, I've been completely flat in the markets. It almost feels like there's nothing to brag about. People that are not true traders will never understand the mentality that it takes to actually come out the other side of that period of time, right? You have to be able to understand that in the long run, this game, there are going to be many points in time where it's not glamorous, it's boring, it's not exciting, and you're doing very similar things each day, each week to find the consistency that you're looking for. But ultimately, I have found that is how freedom is built. There's a great book and a quote from Jocko Willink, right? For those of you that haven't heard of him, he's a ex-Navy SEAL. Does some fantastic talks and ideas, and his book's well worth checking out. But it's all based around this idea that discipline equals freedom. And again, I think it's just another lesson that we think about in life that is very true and reflective of what trading is really like. Discipline equals freedom, right? I think it's a great way to think about this. Last couple of points for you guys. I think I want to re-emphasize a quote that I shared at the beginning of today to also wrap up today, right? Quick success builds ego, slow success builds character, right? The long game compounds and builds your character long before it compounds and builds your capital. I think that's a key thing to be able to take away from today, right? I think the systems that you put in place will protect your progress long after your motivation has died. If you're someone here that feels like I'm not doing the right things because I'm not motivated, I don't feel like it, I'm lazy, whatever it is, you have to understand that it's the quality of your systems. There's a great quote by James Clear, the author of Atomic Habits. And he says something along the lines of, you don't rise to the level of your goals, you fall to the level of your systems or your standards or something like that. I probably butchered it. He does it a lot more justice than I do. But again, found that very, very true as part of everything that we do. You don't rise to the level of your goals, you fall to the level of your systems or your standards. One of the two. Don't quote me on it, but the meaning behind it is very much true, right? So overarching message for today, and especially true when it comes to the Darwinex platform, right? This is not about becoming rich overnight. It is most definitely possible to make a lot of money in this game and to give you all of the things that you're looking for. But the game is tailored in a way to build sustainability, right? It's built in a way to help you to get rich and stay rich over time. There is no point and no value in getting rich and then throwing it all away. It's all about getting rich and staying rich over time. And that's, I think, what you guys have to value in the long run. Okay. Miran says, what's your idea about PPWV Darwinex? Miran, we'll probably do some sessions in the future where we start unpacking actual performance and records over time. It's not going to be something that I pull up today. I will definitely take a look and check it out off the back of today. But it's not going to be something that I'm doing a kind of an in-depth analysis on in today's session in and of itself. Getting ahead with Drojo says, thanks for all this. I can't help myself wanting to jump from one system to another when things don't seem to work as expected. But all of these ideas are helpful. I'm really glad to hear that. Always, really, really humbled to know that you've taken something valuable away from these sessions. And just remind yourself, like the times where things are not working as expected, that's when the temptation to jump ship is going to be at its highest. But you have to remind yourself that every system, even the one that looks most tempting, every single one of them are going to go through a period of time where they don't perform well. It's your ability to manage that period of underperformance which determines your long-term success. Because the reality is there is no holy grail. There is no strategy that wins all the time. Successful trading is not about never losing. It's about managing those periods. And the moment you switch that mindset to understand like periods of underperformance are normal, and it's far more about management rather than elimination, you will start to find more consistency in the long run. And I genuinely speak this from a place of experience, because if you've been here since the beginning of today's session, I shared, my first 6 years were horrendous. And one of the biggest reasons I failed to find consistency is because I didn't have enough confidence or trust in my edge. And all I did continuously was jump from one strategy to another, to another, to another. Because every time I hit a period of drawdown, I gave up on the idea and I wanted to throw in the towel. So yeah, I can totally resonate with where you're feeling, but trust me, if you have an edge, and that's the important underlying factor, if you truly have an edge, stick with it. The worst thing you could do is change or tweak your strategy, because that's what will ruin your consistency in the long run. I think last question for today. Momo Trader says, hi, Sanjeev, how can I get in touch with you directly regarding performance coaching? Very humble to hear it. Probably the best place to reach me is on Twitter. It's probably the social media platform that I'm most active on. But you can find me. My online handle is Trading in the Now. Trading in the Now. So you can find me on X or Instagram, but I use X more so. It's kind of my base. But if you find me on there, shoot me a DM. And happy to have a discussion about some coaching. Right, I think that is all for today. Thank you to everyone who tuned in, whether you're here live, whether you're watching this back on a recording. I'm hoping today brought you some value. It brought you some ways to shift your perspective about how you're approaching this game, and hopefully getting you to start prioritizing playing the long game, because that's what's going to give you the results that you are looking for. Okay. Thank you so much to the team at Darwinex for allowing me to host another valuable and important session for you guys. And mostly thank you to everybody in the comments who has been active today, has been giving some responses, some feedback, some questions, all very, very helpful, and good to know that you guys are enjoying the content here. Thank you all so much. I will speak to you again probably in a couple of weeks. Hope you have a very disciplined time. Until then, I will speak to you very soon. Take care, my friends.